Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Unscripted and Unchoreographed. I'm your host, Sarah, the dancer.
And Neve, the actor.
So tonight we were very excited to have our guest, Julie Lockett, on tonight. And we're going to be talking about her story, her journey, how she got started and what she's up to today. And we're so excited to have you on tonight. How did you get started in the arts? Was it something that started when you were very young or something that was introduced later on?
I started dancing when I was 3, and I used to go to loads of classes like ballet and tap. I was probably doing dance classes 3 or 4 days a week when I was really little. But when I was around 10 or 11, I just gave it all up because I think I just wanted to do other things with my time because that took up so much of my time. It was like Saturday mornings and 2 or 3 evenings a week or whatever. And I carried on dancing like I did like ballroom dancing, disco dancing was big. And I also used to do speech and drama. And then I also started trying sports. I used to play quite a lot of badminton and table tennis, bits of squash. When I was 18, I went to do a degree in modern languages and international relations. I was just treating dance as a hobby. I loved going to see dance performances. When I finished my degree, I was in London and I was a bit lost for a few years, and I'd go to dance classes. And then I did this kind of personal development course. And what kept coming up for me is that I actually wanted to be a dancer. And at the age of 25, I was really embarrassed to say that to people. What did I do? I went and did a foundation course in dance at the Firkin Crane. It was the ETB College in Cork, and we were based at Firkin Crane. And I just thought I was ancient. I was 26. So I was there from 26 to 28. And a lot of the time people would ask me what I did and I'd say, oh, I'm a student. I wouldn't even say I was studying dance or that I wanted to be a dancer because I just thought people wouldn't take me seriously. I was really embarrassed to admit to that that's what I was doing. I went and did a dance degree and I was lucky they accepted me into the second year. So I went and did a second and a third year at what was London Dance College. It was part of Middlesex University in Bedford in the UK. So I graduated from that when I was 30. So I was incredibly old. So that was kind of interesting that I kind of felt like I had to justify myself a lot. And I'm really glad that I went back and did 4 years of training from 26 to 30. It wasn't a conservatoire training. I was at university and you don't do as many hours as you do in a conservatory training. I don't have that kind of body and that kind of technique, so I was never going to fit into that particular mold or be that type of dancer. So I've always had to really kind of carve my own path.
Was your family supportive, or was this something that they kind of thought was a bit mad?
Yeah, they were really supportive. I'd done this self-development course and it was all about writing loads of lists, what would you like to do if you knew you were going to die in 5 years' time, if you knew you were going to die in a year's time, in a week's time. It was this 6-week evening course and it was really good because it just helped me really narrow down. I was kind of having an existential crisis in my mid-20s, what's it all about? What am I going to do with my life? And that just really clarified for me that actually I was really passionate about dance and I wanted to go back to it. And even if it wasn't going to work out, I wanted to give it my best shot. And I've had stages later on in life, like having kids, where I've tried to shrug off dance and just kind of go, oh, look, it's not going to happen for me anymore. I need to just let it go. I can't let it go. I just enjoy the fact now it's I'm an artist and this is what I need to do in life. And that's my path.
How did you find studying both in Cork and Middlesex?
It was full on. When I was studying down in Cork for 2 years, I was studying and working as most students are now, from what I can see. It's tiring. I'd be waiting tables till 1:30 in the morning, and very occasionally I was too tired to go in and train the next morning. And when I was at Middlesex, I enjoyed it, but there were a couple of other mature students there. But I was the oldest. So I walked into the barbers one day and I said, right, just shave off all my hair, because I just felt like I needed to assert my maturity in some way, because I was around a lot of 18, 19-year-old girls. But I was one of those really annoying students who was like super enthusiastic and always putting my hand up and asking loads of questions and clarifications. And like the difference for me in the experience of studying languages, now I loved international relations, but actually going to do a degree in something I was really passionate about, it was just completely different to like really enjoy what I was studying. It was a really great experience. Yeah.
And when you finished your degree and you were out in the world, what was your next move? Did you have, coming up to graduation, this plan of this is what I'm going to do?
No, there was no plan. I was really into choreography at college, so I just had to work out a way to make work what was now called Dance Island was the Association of Professional Dancers. They used to run a lot of choreographic platforms, and I'd make work of those platforms. Some of them were mentored, which was great. I was doing a bit of teaching, waiting tables, doing a lot of waiting tables. To pay the bills. I was having to look through my CV to try and remember everything. So about 2 years out of college, I was making work. So I was showing work in the Dublin Fringe Festival a little bit. A few years out of college, I teamed up with two other choreographers, Eadrainn, and an American dancer, Rebecca Water, who doesn't live in Ireland anymore. And Willie White was the director of project at the time. And there was a young woman, Sarah, who was, I'm not sure if she was doing intern work for them or something, but he kind of said, right, Sarah's going to be your producer. So project supported us to present an evening of 3 pieces of work. So I made a duet for Emma O'Kane and Catherine O'Malley, and then Rebecca presented a solo, and Mairead presented a piece with her partner, musician. And then Project Art Centre, like Willie White was really supportive. He was great at the time. He supported us then with Sarah, this producer, and got us a national tour for that work, which was really, really great. And I was doing bits of performing here and there with different companies. 2004, a long, long time ago. Yeah, so I came across an American dance artist called Deborah Hay. She was around during the Judson Church movement in the 60s in New York, along with like John Cage and Merce Cunningham. And I went and did one of her workshops in the Firkin Crane in Cork. I was just completely bowled over. It was a completely different approach to dance and choreography. That was the beginning of where my work is now. It was kind of really set me on the path of something. So Deborah Hay, she used to run what's called a solo performance commissioning project. So she would create a solo, and about 22 dancers would all commission the solo from her. So you would all pay her a fee. So basically, I met her, did some workshops with her, and she gifted me one of her solos called The Other Side of O, which was great. So I did the solo performance commissioning project supported by the Arts Council, and there were some other Irish dancers there as well. So we went over to Fintorn Foundation community in Scotland, spent 10 days with international artists learning this solo. And it was really amazing experience. And then off the back of that, Ella Clark and myself set up a project which Deborah Hay mentored. And I have something written down here because I wanted to remember how we described it. So it was an artist-led, sustainable model of practice for the progression and radicalization of the art form of dance, establishing a protected environment conducive to meeting the needs of artists. So that was mentored by Deborah Hay. And for me, it just revolutionized my approach to dance. I realized I needed time and space to practice daily. And I think as a visual artist, so being in a studio and not being in a rehearsal and not being in a class, but being in a studio or a space where I have time to practice my art. We got funding for the Arts Council for, I think it was like a 16-week project. And at the time, SS Michael and Johns, which is that now the Gaiety School of Acting? No, that's not the Gaieties. Anyway, we met with Temple Bar Properties and we got access to the huge space in SS Michael and Johns. And we got that space for 16 weeks. And we would have about 6. Now, we couldn't pay the artists, but we could give them like a 2-hour slot 5 days a week. And on a Saturday, we would all come together and talk and look at each other's work. I would work on my own. So the scale of being able to work on my own in this like cathedral-like space was really, 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 really incredible and emboldening. And then once a month, we would invite members of the public in, not for a performance, but for open practice. So we would say to the public, we are just opening the studio door and you are coming in and we are sharing our practice with you. That was quite a remarkable thing. We ran that project for about 5 years. We got funding from Dublin City Council and we did it in different places. We did it in Dance House as well. I think the first year that Dance House was open, we got the big studio on the top floor and we'd have people coming in. We did it in the lab. Yeah, that was really, really exciting to run that project.
And 16 weeks in a place, that's like 4 months. That's incredible, because I don't think you really hear of that nowadays. I've never really heard of people getting that much space for that long.
I remember like being in a meeting with Temple Bar Properties. So Ella Clark and myself were co-directing, and Ella was fantastic. She kind of went in the meeting. She was just like, this is what we need. This is the money we have. What can you do for us? Just really relaying the importance of giving this time and space to artists and how important it was.
It's such an important thing. Like in Dance House, there's residencies and things like that, but you're only getting about a week, maybe 2 weeks. To have 16 weeks, wow, you have so much time and space to really think through your ideas. And okay, that didn't work today. Okay, we'll try something again tomorrow. You have a lot more tomorrows to figure out, okay, this is what we're going to do. I think there's so many projects as well that if I was doing this project again, I'd start where we'd finish, but maybe I would have gone in a completely different direction to where I thought we would have gone at the beginning. And that does lead me on to my next question. Could you give us a little insight into what your practice looks like? Or does it change from project to project depending on how many people or what you're working on?
So the way I've been working for kind of like the last 4 years, so I live in rural Tipperary. I live in Cloughjordan Ecovillage, which is like a 67-acre site. So there's a woodland and allotments. We have a community farm and there's a soccer pitch. I work 4 or 5 mornings a week. I do an hour, so I warm up before I go to the space, but I basically dance on the soccer pitch. And then when I need shelter, there's a dance company based in the Ecovillage, Instant Dissidence, Rita McCarlow. She has a small studio in her house. So when I need shelter, I go and use the studio. But as much as I can, I work with the land, normally on the soccer pitch. Sometimes I go into the woodland. We have a woodland of 17,000 trees as well, or I might go to different places around the Ecovillage. Sometimes I dance in the orchard. Dance is a way for me to write as well. So I have a kind of parallel writing practice and I write choreographic scores. At the moment, this week, I'm doing a residency in Dance House, which is great. Big thank you to Dance Island. And they've been supported by the Arts Council. So this is a paid residency this week, which is great. So I'm actually using a series of my writings. Some of them I created last year and some of them I've been writing this year. So last year I did a performance of land scores and landlines, where I was kind of chalking my writings on the ground on this kind of festival ground. We had an apple festival last September in Cloughjordan because we have around 600 apple trees all through the Ecovillage, so we have an apple festival. And now I'm working with Jason Byrne, who's a theatre director and a filmmaker. So he has been working with me this week, and we're starting with my poetry that I write, and then working with the question like, when does the speaking become the dance? My writing is the starting point. I find Jason and I are in very much the same territory. We've worked on quite a few projects together and it's very exciting.
It sounds so idyllic where you are, that you get to spend so much time outside. Does the movement change, or the idea you're working with change when you take it inside, somewhere like Dance House, where you suddenly got a lot of white walls surrounding you, where you would have had a lot of nature?
Yeah, it's a completely different experience. 2 years ago, I made a solo called Her-acre. So Her-acre. one of the things it came from there's an American farmer called Wendell Berry, and he's a writer as well. And he talks about a way of working with the land, which is eye to acre. So the scale of one person working with an acre of land, as opposed to industrial farming where you're using big machinery to farm hundreds of potentially thousands of acres, and how then that connection between the farmer and the land is severed, is broken. And then the idea of I was thinking of his story, her story. I was thinking of myself a little bit being of a character, like the heroine of the piece. So then I came up with this idea of Her-acre. I created a lot of the material with the land. I was writing a choreographic score, and then as soon as I went into the studio, so for example, I'd be out dancing and it would be windy, and I'd think, how can I synthesize that working with the wind in a studio? So then I got a hairdryer. So the hairdryer became part of the piece, but then I never ended up turning the hairdryer on. Instead, I recorded the sound of the hairdryer with sunlight. I just started using a torch. I ended up using a thermometer as well. I didn't use any sound, so I sang and I spoke text, and I just really wanted to create a piece that was very portable. Like, I would make all the sound. I have a little bag of props as part of the piece, and then I whip out all these different props, and I have a blanket as well, and I wrap that around me and I drag it on the ground. So basically what I've found when I create material with the land, it's kind of like I'm really part of something. So like I'm dancing on the soccer pitch, and then two of the farmers and the farm volunteers are sitting having a meeting in the corner of the field planning their day's work. And then the farmers' horses are in the field opposite me, and then there's like netted kale growing in the field currently adjacent to me. And I've been thinking a lot about reciprocity, and just how like a dance studio needs a dancer. And now when I'm dancing with the land, the birds are flying by and they see the dancer in the field and the horses and the farmers and the veg. So it feels like I'm part of a much bigger picture. And when I'm in the studio, it's like I have to be the engine all the time. I'm the engine in the studio because there's just not as much material to work with. I do find it amazing. A lot of artists and performers go into like a blank space. Like, I don't have any rooms in my house that have no furniture in and nothing on the walls. I forage around the land for material, and then when I bring it into the studio, I have to synthesize it, and the material has to go through a process of translation for it to become theatrical to perform in a theatre space. But I did take Her-acre to Edinburgh a couple of years ago as part of, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Eadrainn, or the residency between Dance Base Edinburgh and Dublin. So I contacted a community-supported agriculture farm on the edge of Edinburgh, and I went and did a performance there outdoors on the land, and I travelled up to Real Bread Island as well and did a performance up there. I think it's the reason like I moved out of Dublin was a rural place, was to put myself in a different context where I would need to learn new things. And that's what I really feel how my practice has evolved, that I speak to a lot of growers and farmers. Like, I know the people who grow my veg, I know the people who produce the milk. So I'm just in a very different context, and I'm learning about new things. I'm going to a conference called Feeding Ourselves, which is a community of growers across Ireland. I'm going there as an artist to participate in discussion and conversations about growing in Ireland and the challenges and the experience of that. I've placed myself in a very different context, so I have a very different frame of reference. So I do find it very exciting coming to the city. Like, I'm walking around going, oh my God, this is really exciting.
How is the residency going at the moment?
It's going really well. So I started off working with the theme of questions that need geographical answers. One of the great things is when I'm up here, I try and meet other artists and have as many conversations as I can. So I was having a great chat with Justine Cooper today. I'm meeting Regan O'Brien tomorrow. She collaborated with Jason Byrne and Ella Clark last year on her piece in Project Art Centre. I'll be meeting Ella Clark tomorrow evening. She's currently movement director for a production in the Abbey. What I'm working on at the moment with Jason is just the performance of my poetry, finding out when that becomes a dance. But I'm starting to understand how speaking is movement, is dance. In the West, we have quite a separation between dancing and acting, but that isn't really the case so much in Japan or in other countries in Asia. Yeah, just choosing to perceive what I do as dance, and then what do I learn through doing that. Really working a lot with my voice this week, which is the first time I've really focused on that, which is really exciting. It's like a whole new area to open up. Yeah.
Is the piece you're working on in the residency, is that part of Spring Moves Festival in Wexford?
No, so I'm going to do a performance of my solo Her-acre down there. Another thing I'm doing this year is Instant Dissidence dance company, Rita McCarlo. She has a piece at the moment called Dancing with Strangers, where she's worked with 4 dancers from Palestine, and then dancers based in Ireland are kind of like the body avatars for the 4 Palestinian dancers. That's exciting. Rita's going to be working with dancers, I think Lebanon and also quite a few different countries, Portugal. I can't remember the list, but the project's really expanded this year. That's very exciting. And then I'll also be doing a performance of writings again as part of Phelan and Newell this September. And there's some funding from Creative Ireland for that, which is great. And I've also applied to Tipperary County Council for some funding for literature, for writing, which is a first. I've never done that before, to apply for funding to write. So that's really exciting. Yeah.
What is your process from taking writing and making movement out of it?
I really enjoy posing questions to my body and noticing the feedback to those questions. So sometimes I feel like when I'm trying to think about a concept, I get very tied up in my head. I find it quite frustrating. So I find the way that I work with writing is I might write a choreographic score, and then I just notice the feedback to those questions and what I can learn about that. So last year I was working with the concept of Indigenous, like I'm a woman from Essex living in a Tipperary, dancing in a field. How can I create an Indigenous dance? What might that look like? So what I choose to do is perceive what I'm doing as an Indigenous dance. And then what do I learn from that? So that's how I would work. So I tend to set up conundrums and riddles for myself, and then just notice the feedback, notice what comes up. But I have a very specific set of questions that I work with, a lot of them that I learned from Deborah Hay, that locates me very acutely in time and space. It's a very exact process of questioning, as opposed to like, oh, I'm going to move around and what's going on. It's like, no, I'm constantly monitoring and checking in loads of different ways and locating myself in space very exactly to notice the feedback.
Are there any people that you are heavily influenced by, or that you really enjoy watching or being part of their work?
I'm a bit of a magpie. I get inspiration from anything and everything. I get really inspired by other women's stories. I love listening to a podcast called Great Women Artists. I get huge inspiration from that, and talking to other artists. I get very inspired listening to the growers where I live when they talk about their work and how the soil works. I just get inspired by other people who can do things really well, and I'm quite comfortable like jumping genres, drawing inspiration from anything and everything.
How did you find being an artist and creating work, but also being a mother and having to balance it? Because women get left with a lot of looking after children or looking after elderly people, especially a lot of artists tend to be freelancers. But if you'd like to, how did you manage it all?
It was very messy. So when I had my first son, I was 35. I kind of kept the model of working little and often. So before I had children, one thing Ella and I used to do was we would, in order to maintain a daily practice but without funding, we used to use Coshcane Dance Studio, and we would go in and work there from kind of 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. That was something we learned from Deborah, just accessing space when other people weren't using it. And so when I had my first son, because I had a good relationship with the Dublin City Arts officer, he would allow me to come in at 8 in the morning and I'd work till 9:30, and then I'd cycle back home. And my husband was going off to work at the time. I did not have a plan for when I had kids. It probably would have been a good idea to be a bit strategic and actually plan what I was going to do once I had kids. I mean, I was just looking through my CV, like a massive gap. I did keep a thread going, but like I couldn't get to class. I'd get bits of work, or I was doing teaching work, but then I'd have to pay for childcare. I was doing it because I wanted to keep working as a dancer. Other female dancers were really understanding. You know, I'd park the 2-year-old in a buggy in the corner of the studio. We were doing Genesis Project, and I did used to bring my son, who was a toddler, into the studio, and sometimes he'd join all the dancers in the studio on the sharing days, and he'd be rolling around the place, or we'd pick him up and he'd be flying around, and that was really great. When I moved down to Tipperary, my boys were like 3 and 5, and I did used to commute a bit up to Dublin, and I used to have to come and get like an au pair, come and live in the house, and oh God, it was a lot of like figuring out the logistics. But I did feel like my grip on my dance career really, really loosening. And I did kind of feel like I was really becoming very untethered from it. I had to really consciously make my way back to it, because I've never been the kind of dancer that gets asked to do a load of projects by other companies. It's always like I've made my own work. So it was a bit messy. I didn't really realize what was going on. I was like, all right, I'm going to just stop now. I'm getting too old. I can't get back into it. But I just couldn't. That need was still there. And I was like, no, I really need to go back to it. And I really love it. I want to go back to it. My confidence was quite low as well. And then it was great when Rita McCarlow from Instant Dissidence moved to Cloughjordan about 5 years ago. And she was amazing. And because I was working with the land and I had practice going, she saw what I was doing. And then it's like I had a dance community suddenly. It's like I have another dancer here. I have a dance community in Cloughjordan, which was brilliant. I guess a bit like both of you working together. Once something becomes a dialogue, so much more comes from that. And Rita is a lot more experienced than I am. She's been a really great mentor. We meet every week and have great artist conversations. We go and see work together and then we discuss it. I think she's been really, really important supporting me in getting back. And I've done some collaborations with her and some work with her as well.
When you have been applying for funding, has there been any kind of allowances for childcare, or any kind of things like that have made it easier for parents to get involved in the arts? What has been your experience of that?
Like when we were doing Genesis Project, for about 4 years of that, I had kids, and sometimes we'd write childcare costs into the budget and we would get the money for that. But that's not the case with lots of other work I've done. I generally find people are understanding. I mean, I think it's changed a lot. It's just the financial cost of childcare. So by the time I go off to work and I'm paying someone to mind my kids, financially it doesn't make sense. And then if I can't formally write that childcare down, or if I don't have formal receipts for it and stuff. And also because I was living in a rural place, I'd often have to come up to the city to work. Sometimes my mother-in-law was really good and she'd go down and stay in my house, and I would go and stay up in Dublin in her house. But it's always cobbling stuff together. It can be really challenging. Like, I have a great husband, he's very supportive. As an artist, making the decision to have kids, and then like I was able to get a mortgage and buy a house, and then there are those financial commitments. For me, that had to come first. I had to be able to pay the bills every week, and the kids had to be minded, and then comes the art. Being a mother has changed me so much. So I think it's really important that parents are making art as well, so that we're getting art made from that perspective. The world's changing all the time, and people are having children now in a different set of circumstances to the ones that I was living with. But I would say, like, have a plan. You need to be quite strategic. You're going to co-parent. How are you going to do this? You need to have a plan. because in my experience as a woman, I didn't have a plan. And then suddenly it's like, oh shit, I'm minding the kids. So, and I have 2 great kids, but yeah, I would just say you've got to have a strategy.
And that leads me on to my next question. How did having kids change or affect your work?
I didn't carry my first son so much in a harness, but I did with my second son. Suddenly my work became very, very tactile because I was carrying a baby around with me a lot. So suddenly it was like I got into the studio to make a duet. It all became very, very tactile. That was like something that I immediately noticed. And then after a while, I got really angry and I made like this work in progress duet, which was called Push. And I was like shoving the other dancer around the space. I was like, where are you okay with this? Can I push you against the wall? Can I walk on you? I think that was all my frustration coming out with parenting. So kind of just quite different responses coming up. I think that was with Lisa McLaughlin, and she was very understanding. She was great. She's very open to that.
That's amazing. I would never have thought holding a baby and then your work becoming more tactile and more contact based. Is there anything you feel that the government can do to help artists more? And that can be anything, can be funding, like you said, space, money is no object. If you have a magic wand, that kind of thing.
I think if I had a magic wand, I mean, think how amazing it would be to be able to be a full-time artist with access to a studio. If I could be a full-time artist in terms of how I could develop, I could make so much more work, I could collaborate a lot more. It would immediately expand the potential of what I could dream of doing. Expectations are curtailed and limited because I'm always dealing with immediate finites of like, I have an hour this morning to go and dance, and then by 10 o'clock I need to start doing other paid work. In terms of the cultural life of Ireland, think what that could do, how expansive that could be. It could seep and permeate into so many other areas of life. It's like we could cross-fertilize. There could just be so many places of collaboration, of meeting and crossovers of different fields of work. It would be so vibrant. If I were to walk around the city, what would that look like if there were artists being paid to paint murals or perform work on the street? Or, if I looked up into a studio and there were 20, 30 artists working away in that building, then leaving and connecting with the people in their local cafe, what conversations would they have and what would that lead to? In terms of creating an ecology, I think of like a mycelium network underground, which are all the pathways where all the trees and the plants communicate and share the different minerals and things that they need. They all work together as a community. If there was like this above ground mycelium network of artists and it was all visible, such vibrancy, such colour, such soulfulness and such heart. What an amazing thing. Wouldn't that be an amazing way to live? And that everyone was born with the possibility to be able to explore that potentially, or at least have an aspect of there being an artist within their work.
It's so true to have artist connection. Hopefully, like this podcast has been able to do that as well. It's definitely done it for myself and Eve. You get to meet people that you wouldn't necessarily have crossed paths before, which I think is always great. But it would be so nice if it was just a thing like, yeah, we could be paid to sit here and talk about our experiences, the amount of work that could be created, and like that you were working in a space for 16 weeks, and the fact that now today, like, I'm sitting here going, oh, imagine having the space for 16 weeks. That'd be amazing. Like, your work would get so much further, so much more in depth. You'd have time to think about it and not, I only have the week, or I only have these 3 hours, and we need to create something so we can show something, so we've done something. I think we all need our magic wands.
When I was doing residency a couple of years ago, the question came up for me, like, what if there's no rush in the studio? It's coming from a very different different place.
Got a studio space with no rushing. It almost seems foreign.
I would like to underline the importance of the need for artists to be able to access time and space to practice, and how vital that is. Once an artist has access to time and space, then there's that very strong foundation, and other things can come out of that. And I think that autonomy of practice and that agency is really crucial to longevity, and also to create a very strong basis in people's work. And I also understand that some people don't like going into a studio on their own. Like, I spend a lot of time on my own working, and I know there are lots and lots of artists who don't like to do that, and that's fair enough because we all work in different ways. For me, that's been really, really key, even like being able to go into Cloughjordan Dance Studio early in the morning and get free space. Like, I currently can't go and do a residency somewhere if I'm not paid, because I have other paid work that I have to do at home. I'm self-employed. Somebody can offer me space somewhere, but if I have to travel an hour to get there, I can't afford to do that. So what I've really benefited from, and what's strong in my practice now, is just having that baseline of a daily practice.
Unfortunately, that was our last question. It's been absolutely lovely chatting to you, getting to know your practice and getting to know you and your story and your journey. It's just been wonderful.
I think I've been listening to some of the podcasts, and it's been great. Like Laurie, I've known them for years on and off, and there was so much I didn't know about them. So that was really lovely to kind of get to know them a bit more.
It's wonderful. People seem to find it like slightly reflective, because it's like, how did you get started and what's your story? We've had a few where people go, oh yeah, I forgot I did that. Oh yeah, God, actually I've done a good bit. I've been busy. Hasn't always felt like it, but yeah, I'm busy enough.